Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Jason Roman, aka Mr. Stockezy on Instagram. Jason, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, brother. I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on here. It's always a pleasure to sit down and talk about the work.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. If you can you give a quick introduction to the listeners?
My name is Jason Roman. I'm born and raised in New York City. I was born in Harlem, grew up in Brooklyn in the Bronx. I picked up a camera about 5, 6 years ago, and I've been shooting ever since. And I'm now a Leica photographer. I'm a New York ambassador for the brand, and things have been on the up and up as of late.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was telling you before we hopped on the pod today that you are one of the very first people when I hopped into this photography journey that I found on YouTube, and it was probably an X100F video or an XT2 video. It was something about your journey with Fuji, and I had just kind of sold my Canon 60D, I want to say, my very first introductory camera, and I got into Fuji because street photography was the thing that I kind of fell in love with. Via a number of documentaries that have really set my soul on fire. But talk to me a little bit about your photography journey. You said you picked up a camera 5 or 6 years ago. Like, what was the process like? What were you doing before that? And kind of how did you get bit by the creative bug?
Well, actually, one of my homies, Tyler Christopher Brown, gave me his old Canon Rebel T3i because I was still studying acting at the time. Actually, I was just out of acting school, and I kind of was getting the bug to film something. So I wanted to get a camera so that I could make videos. I didn't even really intend on shooting or anything like that. And that ended up turning into me feeling a bit impatient, waiting for other people to create things. And there was a book that I had owned that a friend introduced me to, which was Bruce Davison's Subway.
Oh,
I
nice.
still think it's one of the greatest depictions of New York ever, because it feels like the way I grew up in New York in 1980s. And I always looked at this book, but for some weird reason, this one particular day, this book was kind of staring at me, and I was just like, this camera takes pictures. So I went outside and started taking pictures with this Canon camera, and it was just exactly what I was looking for, the experience. The people in the streets were talking to me. They saw me kind of watching this wall, and I took this photo of this guy with his hands in his pocket wearing against this really contrasty yellow wall, and it was shadows and all this stuff. And these guys saw me take the photo, and they came over, and they were kind of drunk. It was the Lower East Side, and the dude took off his Jordan, and he was like, yo, take my picture. And it just became this thing where I was like, oh, wow, this camera is kind of giving me access to something that, born and raised in New York, you talk to strangers, but you don't really tap in that way. And that to me was like the adrenaline, and the access was everything. So I caught myself outside every single day shooting. And then it got to the point where this camera was too big, so I needed something a little more compact. So I started doing all this research, and I came across Leica, and I was like, a fucking $10,000 camera. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Why is a camera $10,000? And then I came across the X Pro 2, and I ended up renting an X100T for a little bit, and then I bought my first Fujifilm camera, which was the X Pro 2. And after that, it was all history because I had something light and compact. I never, ever, 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 ever walked out of my house without a camera on me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was the X Pro 2 video, not the XT2. I do remember it vividly
Yeah,
because I own that camera. I went through the entirety of, I guess, every aspiring photographer's YouTube journey. So you start in, a DSLR world, you downsize to something smaller, more compact in the mirrorless landscape. I actually did purchase my dream camera, which was a Leica M6, which I very sadly had to let go
nice.
in the last year.
I'm sorry to hear
Yeah,
that.
the world is a little bit
You'll get another
different,
one.
and the money is
Yeah.
a little bit more important than it was, 12 months ago. But what I find so interesting is everyone has very similar paths in terms of how they get upon these journeys. So for you, what I like to kind of drill into is what was it about those experiences that you had on the street? When was it the first photo that you can think of in your mind that was wow, I'm actually really good at this. I've got an eye for this, and I can make a
Mm.
career out of that.
Well, wow, that's interesting because I don't know that those thoughts ever particularly crossed my mind. I think
Oh,
I was so invested in what I was doing that when interest and money started coming, it was constantly a surprise
oh,
because um, I just never thought it would be something I could make money off of. My path in life was supposed to be so different. At least that's what I thought, and that's why it's always so interesting to me when people ask for advice about photography. I'm just like, the one thing that I think is crystal clear is that there is no blueprint.
Hmm.
There's no lines that you can trace. There's never going to be a story that's similar where it's like, oh, go to school and then do this. It's like you just don't know what's going to happen. Um, but I do remember having a conversation with a friend one day, running into her because my Instagram went from being personal to just being photography, and this was a pivotal moment because she was drunk and she was outside of this like place in the Lower East Side, and she was like, I really like your photos. Like, it's like so annoying. Like sometimes your friends buy a camera and then like all of a sudden you're like looking at all their crap and like she was like, I genuinely look forward to like seeing your photos. Like I'm not annoyed by you. And I was like, wow. I was like, I didn't even think that people were thinking of me in that way. So that was a moment where I started to take it a little bit more seriously.
Hmm.
And also with YouTube, because I always wanted to start a YouTube channel, right? So like I had back in the day always wanted to be a tech YouTuber
Oh,
because I love
nice.
technology, right? So I was always had the Pixel phones, the Nexus phones, the OnePlus. I was always on the list for all that stuff. But I just never got around to starting that channel. So photography gave me that initial push. And I don't know if it was my street photography settings video or the Ode Expro 2 video, but one of them got like 25,000 views when I uploaded it. And I was like away with my girlfriend, and like I left my phone upstairs in the bedroom, and I went back up and I saw my phone. It was just like a million notifications, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And like, there's just these things that happen, and I just kind of was like coasting through it because I just loved photography.
Hmm.
And one more pivotal moment for me with now what's happening with Leica is one of the reps from Leica who had asked me to shoot a couple pieces on Ralph Gibson. She put a couple loaner cameras in my hand. I didn't really take it that seriously because I was very in love with my Fuji cameras at the time.
Hmm.
And aspiring to shoot Leica, it's very difficult. It's very expensive. And I wasn't there in my career, but I was assisting, and I knew that I loved photography, and I was trying to figure out what it would be. And maybe the reason why I never had that moment is because I was assisting people who were like incredible portrait, legendary. Like these guys were uber successful. And the people that were teaching me photography were also masters of their craft, masters of lighting. So I never felt like anything amongst them.
Right.
You know what
Sure.
I mean? But
Hmm.
like that has a tendency when you're kind of in somebody's shadow sometimes. But so Kieran was reaching out to me, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Somebody from Leica's interested in me, but they probably just want me to, who knows what it was. But a friend of mine, Jason Momoa, was shooting an ad for Leica at the Bowery Hotel one day, and he asked me to come by to help out with some location scouting.
Hmm.
I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come by. And he got on the phone and he's talking to this woman, and he's like, oh, hey, Kieran. He gets off the phone, and I'm like, is that Kieran Karnani? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you know her? I'm like, yeah, that's my contact at Leica. And I'm like, wait a minute. So the woman that's reaching out to me, that's trying to hook me up with Leica cameras, is talking to you? I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I gotta take this more seriously.
That's pretty
So
funny.
that was a huge moment, and that was probably about 3 years ago. So
That's
that's when I
awesome.
started being like, oh, let me jump on the Leica boat for real now.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen. I'm a gigantic Leica fanboy, and the I don't know if it's the FOMO or just the love for the brand and all that they have to, what they mean to the photography world is like it's an aspirational thing, right? It's not.
Hmm.
It is obviously a luxury good based on the price, but in consideration of other luxury products, whether it's like handbags or whatever, it's not that kind of thing because it's a tool. At the end of the day, it's like you're
Yeah.
making art with these incredibly beautiful products, and yeah, man, I'm such a huge fan. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
You
I'm a big fanboy too now these days.
yeah, it's kind of hard not to be. I mean, they're making just some incredible stuff these days.
Yeah.
It's truly remarkable. You mentioned you were like kind of working with like a number of really famous portrait photographers and like people whose careers like at the time were like obviously vastly ahead of where you were. Talk to
Hmm.
me a little bit about like what goes through your mind from a confidence perspective, or perhaps from like an imposter syndrome perspective. Like, because as you know, my bio says I'm a photographer, and then when you look at the work that someone like you have done in comparison to me, it's hard to believe that you and I have the same quote unquote job description. But talk to me a little bit about what talk to me a little bit about like what those feelings are like when you Jason Roman, common 3-year photographer are sitting in a room assisting some like huge names in the world of photography?
Well, I mean, I think that's like to say I was intimidated might be like the wrong sentiment because like obviously there's so much there, but I'm working with those people because I want to learn
Mm-hmm.
from them. And I think one of the biggest issues right now with photography in this modern time is that their influences are all wrong. Their inspirations are all wrong. You know, I trust me, I'm happy when someone says that they love my work and that like I'm one of their favorite photographers, but if I'm one of your favorite photographers, then you're definitely not doing the work. You know what I mean? Like you need to know about everybody that came before me. And like when we talk about portraits, a lot of people take portraits and they're so obsessed with shooting wide open and all this stuff, but like the portrait masters that came before us, these guys don't know anything below f8,
Yeah, right.
So it's like it's just we're all a product of the times where it's like people want fast lenses, they want sharpness, they don't care about the artistic interpretation of the images. So for me, being around those people, my influences were so strong. The people that were inspiring me were so strong, and I'm lucky to have that because if I didn't, my work would look completely different.
Hmm.
My colors wouldn't be the way my colors were if I didn't meet Norman Jean Roy. You know, um, I wouldn't take a portrait the way that I'd take a portrait if I didn't meet Norman Jean Roy, or Zenith Richards. And these guys introduced me to other people that like. So, for example, Paul Gilmore and Zenith Richards brought me on to be assistants to Norman Jean Roy. Norman Jean Roy is the male Annie Leibovitz,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason that they work for him is because Paul Gilmore and Zenith Richards used to assist Annie Leibovitz. So these guys are legends in the space. You know what I mean? I got to spend time with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is knowledge that's constantly being passed down. So if your foundation is strong, then your work can eventually reflect that. But if you're consuming things that are just, popular right now, kind of trendy, then your work might never reflect the greatness that you aspire to be.
Oh, I love that. I'm super glad you brought that up because in like an Instagram social media driven landscape, obviously a lot of careers or, opportunities are, made or broken via how many followers you have. What is your audience? So talk to me a little bit about pressures that you have as an individual content creator, photographer, and what like those feelings look like in terms of like when you go to post something on social, when you make work. Do you have in the
Yeah.
back of your mind any thought process about, well, this wasn't a well received image because it didn't have X number of likes and shit like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I struggle with a great deal. I think likes in photography and following is probably one of the worst things to ever happen.
For sure.
Um, and it sucks because I'm born into it. I bought a camera when Instagram existed, right? So I'm all tangled up with likes
Mm-hmm.
and user interaction and following and all that stuff. But I also am very aware of the negative side of all that. I knew way before I was ready that because of the attention I was getting, that I thought my work was better than it was, you
Ooh.
know? And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of accounts out there with hundreds of thousands of followers and they don't know how to compose a proper image.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it's all color grading and cool, that's fine. Whatever your artistic representation needs to be, whatever you feel like it is that you're trying to convey with your image, that's great. But likes do not equate to you being a good photographer, right?
Love
Like
that.
whether or not you're going to share the image should not be the standard if it's a good image.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there are other ways to go. So I post once every few months because I try to not make Instagram my standard. It's not going to define me as a photographer. So that is part of the struggle of wanting to share more, but also at the same time not trying to get this thing to be the mecca for me and whether or not my images were good or not. So I would like to transition more to using Instagram as somewhat of a journal where I can just post my musings.
I love that. I read something interesting, and when Instagram was down a couple weeks ago for like the entirety of the day,
Mhm.
about the importance of printing your work because at the end of the day, like Instagram is an application that could theoretically disappear at any moment's notice. And then if you're an Instagram photographer and the entirety of your portfolio lives on a social media app, and that app no longer exists, well, neither does your work. So I'm super glad that you brought that up, because it is something that as a new photographer, someone who's trying to gain their foothold in the industry and like grow, it's a daunting task to feel like that your work is not being appreciated because you're not getting a number of likes or followers. And I think that your context for those items are super important, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in context, I meet people all the time who have smaller followings than me that do way more impressive stuff than me. These guys are DPs on like big film sets, they're cinematographers. They're photographing people that like I would never have access to, and they have like 300 followers. And it's because that stuff doesn't matter to them.
Totally.
When you're actually doing it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
When you're actually doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that is so fucking important and true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm 35. I'll be 36 in a month, and I kind of stumbled into...
get out of here. Same.
Oh, no way. Happy birthday.
I'll be 36 on the 25th.
I'm the 17th. That's fucking wild. Wow.
Well, the 25th of November.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Nice.
December. Okay, wow. So we're close. We're close in age.
Well,
yeah.
Happy early birthday. That's so funny.
Same.
So like a lot of my life was sort of lived like go to high school, go to college, get a job, get married, white picket fence. Now, thankfully, I never got married or bought a house. But,
Dodge the bullet.
the entirety of your life is sort of planned out in front of you. Like, where are you going to be in 5 years? What am I doing after college, etc.? Do you look at like your career today and look at where you started 5 or 6 years ago and kind of gamify where you're going to be 5 or 6 years from now? Or do you focus more on the present and kind of live and work in the moment?
Well, I have always so that's actually a really big topic for me these days, because I think I'm someone that's kind of always coasted a bit and just let life take me where it was going to take me. And that's also one of the negatives of being in New York City, is that it is a hamster wheel. And sometimes you're just kind of running and you forget to look up. And when you do look up, you're like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, this isn't what I wanted to do. I'm shooting weddings. Like, that's not why I bought a camera. It just like it just has a tendency to do that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the benefits of the lockdown was that I got to consider those things and contemplate which direction I wanted to go to. I had the pleasure of being with Ralph Gibson and Ted Forbes like about a month ago. We shot a couple pieces out in Sag Harbor with him, and we're sitting around having lunch, and Ralph Gibson asked my girlfriend and then everybody around the table what their life looked like in 10 years in four sentences.
Wow.
And he was like, where do you see yourself? Like, tell me what your life is in 10 years in 4 sentences. And of course she didn't really have an answer. Nobody really had an answer within 4 sentences, but we all ended up wasting our 4 sentences. And the only thing that Ralph said as a rebuttal was, well, if you don't know, then you'll surely never get it.
Wow.
And it's simple, right? But it's effective, because a lot of us don't know and we're just kind of coasting, right? And it's like, if you don't know, how the hell will you ever get there?
Yeah.
So that's something I'm really contemplating right now, because as I said, I'm born into it with Instagram and all this stuff, and I've struggled with photography to be more conceptual with my work. When I started photography, because I was a techie, I learned all the technical aspects of photography. I knew everything about the aperture and the shutter speeds and da-da-da-da, but I didn't focus on the art of it, which is why I work as a professional, not an artist, as Ralph Gibson would say. But so my future is trying to dedicate myself more to the art of it all, and blending the two, that technical aspect of who I am and the art, and getting onto more sets and doing BTS for bigger picture films and things like that. So alongside putting out some New York books that I'm also working on right now.
Oh, awesome. Super happy to hear that. That's awesome. When I look back at like what I've done over the course of my life, it's funny because like I very similarly think about how I kind of just ended up in this position, right? Like you lose a job in the middle of a pandemic, you just like it gives you a really good opportunity to kind of like think about what the hell I want to do with the rest of my life. And that question from Ralph is very interesting. I just actually bought a book that arrived today called, I think, Start at the End. So it's basically a book about like figuring out what you want and then starting there and working your way backwards. And I'm very excited to read that. It's very appropriate to the quote that Ralph just said. So this is a long-winded story to a question, but yesterday I almost got hit by a car and killed. It was crazy. Like legit crossing the street in front of my apartment, person blew through a red light, passed within inches of me, and this woman across the street gasped. And she was like mortified about what happened. I was like completely oblivious to what had transpired. I had music on. I was taking pictures, didn't know what was going on. And then I got home and I thought about it. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, my life almost ended yesterday and I haven't done shit. And I thought it was a really good kind of gauge for where I feel from an artist perspective of like, what have I accomplished now and where am I going with my art? And it's like nothing and anywhere I want. So from your art perspective, from your photography, what is like one thing that you've done to date that you're super proud of?
I had faith in myself, to be completely honest. I was bartending before I started really considering myself a professional photographer or videographer. And I just quit the bar. I just up and was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I took that leap of faith just to like see if I could make it work. I knew that if it didn't work, that life would still be there for me. It's easy to get back into bartending in New York City or something else like that. But I think that's the single most important thing that I've done was just allowing myself the actual chance to be successful at something. I don't think a lot of people do that, and they're kind of afraid to do that. But I told myself I'd take 2 or 3 months to just give this a real shot. There was already some attention there, so I was working with something that had already built up. But I went after it, and within a few months, I was already enjoying a better life than I had been bartending for the last 8 years.
Yeah, that's really good news for someone like me who's giving himself a year to make this happen. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality. It's like how often do we actually focus on the personal? A lot of stories that people hide that are very successful is that they were given opportunities or they came from money, or a lot of artists try to bury those pasts. But it's very difficult for someone that's come from nothing to make something of themselves when someone's not investing in their future, or they don't have like, imagine if none of us had a bill to pay and we were all photographers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you didn't have to split your time doing something else, if you were a painter, if you were a musician, if you could stay at home and learn and practice all day long, what a luxury that would be. But there's so many people out there that have had that luxury, but they don't factor that into their success.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's easy to simply forget the hand up or the leg up in the world that some people are given and others aren't. And I think part of the reason why I find the journey so rewarding is that I'm doing it on my own. I don't have, like you mentioned, I don't have a financial backer, like, famous photographer uncle who's like, hey, come shoot XYZ celebrity. Yeah, right.
Left all his Leicas in the closet for me.
Right. Right. I think that's what's made part of this journey super rewarding, because it's like me doing it on my own. And yeah.
Well, that's good that you recognize that, because I don't think a lot of people recognize that. And I think that's what can be so difficult about this hustle and trying to make it, is that like, if you don't realize that a lot of people have had help and you're just looking at Instagram and going, oh, well, why aren't I that successful? Why can't I do that? It's not a good place to be mentally or inspirationally.
For sure. I'm glad that you brought up inspirationally. What are, like, I don't know if it's specifically to a photographer or a body of work that inspires you, but being that you are one of my inspirations from a photography perspective, talk to me about that process of like what creatively excites you and what kind of gets you motivated to make art.
I appreciate that. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
saying that. I mean, I look at a lot of photographers that come before me. People that have been shooting longer than I have. I think because it's so easy for people to buy a camera these days, I don't particularly find a lot of my peers to be that inspiration for me, because I do think that what I realize about my journey is that I'm still trying to figure it out, right? So I haven't been shooting long enough to know what I want to say with my photography yet. And I'm not confused about that. And, people can I look at work and I'm like, this is a beautiful image, right? But when I look at someone like a Ralph Gibson or Gordon Parks, um, the inspiration that comes from that, the knowledge of self that comes from those bodies of work is like so profound to me, and that's what I'm after. So those are the kind of things that I seek inspiration from people that know themselves and they know what it is that they're trying to say about their work.
Mm.
Um, so that's really important to me.
Yeah. I like,
Finding mentors.
yeah. I think it's funny because you can have so many creative inspirations from like your pocket, right? So like access
Hmm.
to Instagram, YouTube, whatever it might be, that there's an infinite number of people that can inspire you to create work. And I'm also really glad that you said about you're not sure what your work's trying to say yet, because I struggle with that now. Because like as I'm just starting off and I'm trying to gain a foothold, like I mentioned, you want to make images that are truthful to who I am as an artist, but also something that's going to be liked, right? I often
Hmm.
kid that one of my favorite photos that I've ever taken is a homeless woman behind her cart with all of her belongings and just like her barefoot covered in mud and dirt sticking out behind it. And it's like a powerful image. Like if someone else took that photo, it'd be like, wow, this is a tremendous image. And it never is liked when I put it out there. And it's one of those things that you have to I have to consciously think about, that the things that I'm creating or what I want to say doesn't necessarily need to be impacted by whether someone double taps a heart on a social media.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the hardest part of the journey is when you do start to question why you take the images you take. That was one of the most difficult things for me when I started to ask myself why. Why did I shoot that? You know what I mean? What does this image actually convey? What does it say about me as a photographer, about my perspective on the world? And it kind of stopped me from shooting for a while because I didn't know how to answer the question, and a lot of things that I was shooting started to feel superficial.
Ooh.
Um, so I think that's kind of why I have strayed away from the abstract, the artistic frame, the silhouettes, and all that stuff, and I focus on people, the subjects. I focus on subject first, more than composition, more than lighting, because I know that I love people. That's why I photograph.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in a version of New York that doesn't exist, that's fading. So when I go out to photograph, my point of departure, as Ralph would say, is the people. It's
Yeah.
the New Yorkers. It's the dying breed. So I know every time I press that shutter what it is that I'm trying to convey these days, you know?
I'm appreciative that you said that, because very similarly, I'm super not interested in making like a commercially viable photo. Like I'm very interested in being like drawn to the subject of what they are. And like I put very little focus on like where are they in the frame, what am I trying to like mirror them as, etc. And I just am like focused on the people, and that's cool that we have that in common. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, you shoot a lot with Leica. Talk to me about digital versus film, because I know you
Mm.
do both, but they are obviously drastically different mediums. Do you kind of juggle between digital and film? Do you go out consciously some days with the film camera versus the digital? What's like your street process like?
Yeah, I mean, shooting film for me is a very romantic thing. I shoot it when I'm like not being so what's the word that I'm looking for? Um, Precious about capturing images. If I go out for like a very serious day of shooting, I want to shoot digital
Hmm.
because, I'm a student of this stuff and I need fast results. And the reality is that film just isn't, it's not fast enough for me. It doesn't fit into my lifestyle and my workflow. So when I shoot film, I have a bag in the fridge that all my exposures is just, they go in this Ziploc bag. And maybe in a year or two from now, I'll develop all that film and I'll have all these images that are really interesting. But for now, I just don't. To me, it's not a priority in this moment. I'm in the moment of producing, and the way for me to produce the fastest is to shoot digitally.
Wow, I'm so surprised to hear that. I personally love shooting film. Like I mentioned offline, I sold my M6, which was like painful, but the process of street photography in film is just super fun to me and rewarding in
Hmm.
that I never know if I got anything or if I just
Hmm.
fucking missed the focus, missed everything. I had it
Yeah.
on 25 shutter speed and I needed to be on 250. Like, I just love that process.
Yeah.
I remember walking around about a year ago and I found this guy shirtless playing guitar, and I took an entire roll of film of him, and then the film got stuck in the leader and I couldn't get it out. And then I took
There
it
you
to my
go.
lab and they couldn't like salvage it, and it was just blank. And I was like, fuck. But I also loved it
Yeah.
because then it like gives
Yeah.
me like a lot of love for the images that I am able to create. When everything falls into place in the right
Yeah,
context.
and that's totally fine. Some people that process is like it's everything for them, and I enjoy that process. When I'm traveling and just being romantic. Like I said, me and my girlfriend in Greece, I have a film camera. It's
Yeah.
like nice, and I'm creating memories and like I take it out on some days where I'm moving a little bit at a slower pace and I'm more contemplative.
Hmm.
But the reality is that if I ever when I was shooting film more often, I would bring a digital camera and a film camera, which meant I was creating doubles,
Oh.
right? So I would put black and white in my on my my film camera and shoot black and whites. But if these doubles exist, then it kind of negates the fact that I'm even shooting it. So, which is why I resort to saying, you know what, film is for the future.
Hmm.
For me, digital is for the now. And during the lockdown, I had a conversation with Ralph about this actually. And because I told myself, okay, I'm only going to shoot film during the lockdown. That's it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to scan it. I'm going to do the whole nine. And I got through about 6 rolls. And I stopped and I was asking Ralph, I said, why don't you, do you ever shoot film anymore? And he was like, no, I haven't loaded film into my camera in 10 years.
Wow.
And most of the people, most of these legends, most of these people that we know, Joe Mayerowitz, Ralph Gibson, Saul Leiter before he died, none of them shot film anymore because it wasn't practical. Back then, when it was practical, they had a whole newsroom or whatever, whoever it was, developing all their film, and it didn't cost nearly as much as it does now. So he started talking to me about Sacred Land, which is his latest book, and he said he shot that entire book in 2 weeks.
Wow.
He had like two assistants maybe, and they went around Israel and made this book. And he said if I had to do that back when I was shooting film, I would have needed, I don't know, 10 assistants, and it would have probably taken me more than a month to create this book. I mean, to shoot it.
Hmm.
And he's like, the reality is nowadays I'm working off of ideas, and my ideas move faster than the darkroom.
Hmm.
And that's all he had to say for me to basically
I mean,
put my film camera to the side. And
I appreciate that. I'm
I'm just in a space where I'm growing so fast and what it is that I'm doing, and I can't have anything else slow me down.
Oh, totally.
So
Yeah, I've been shooting exclusively digitally for the last year just because, I want to be a commercially viable photographer, and
hmm
that means in this day and age shooting digital. And plus, like, when you take a massive pay cut from what I was earning to zero, film's expensive. It's not exactly
yeah,
like
well, yeah, it's a
practical.
dollar a shot.
It's not
Yeah.
as practical for sure. Um,
Mhm.
so you kind of came into my life digitally via YouTube when I was first starting out, and I found your videos to be incredibly informative and like knowledgeable, and like things that I were able to like take from a practical perspective and then use in my own work. What's some tips and advice that you have for new photographers starting out on their journey, besides don't start?
Don't start. Don't do it. No, I mean honestly, my tips are pretty simple and straightforward. If you're shooting with anything that you can't afford to have on you all the time, sell it and go get something that you can have on you all the time. That is the most um, valuable advice I can give anybody. If there is a camera in your life right now that you have to think twice about bringing out, sell it and get something smaller. I don't care
Ooh.
what it is, get rid of it because it's holding you back. I used to think about walking around with my Canon all the time, and I would be like, well, am I going to dinner tonight? Am I going to go get drinks? Who am I going to go see? Do I want this thing around my neck? I'm going to the movie theater, da 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 da. And it created a weight in my life, and it made me shoot less than I actually wanted to. I wanted to be shooting more, but I found myself leaving that camera home a lot more than I would have. And if I never switched, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at now. I wouldn't have put out the amount of work that I was able to put out by having this camera with me. Um, and then I would also say, uh, don't forget about what's immediately in front of you when you're photographing. I think we all want to travel and do these beautiful images that are beyond our means, but like Some of the greatest photographers, even like look at someone like Andre Wagner, some of the greatest images he's put out are from a kid who lives right below him
Hmm.
in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's stories all around you. Your family is probably more fascinating to all of us strangers than they are to you, but start close.
Yeah. That's I think that's good context, you know. I some of my favorite images I've taken are of like my nieces and my nephew,
Hmm.
and you know, that didn't require me to hop on a plane and go to, you know, Marrakesh or, or Greece or wherever it is, you
Yeah,
know.
where I just came from.
Oh, were you just oh man, wow, that's so weird.
Yeah,
I bet I just subconsciously brought that up like from following
that's
you. That's
hilarious.
so
Yeah,
funny.
no, I was in Marrakesh with Gadget and my brother, and then yeah, I just got back. I was traveling for like the last month,
All right, well
so
that's on
it's
my
nice to be home.
that's on my my bucket list for sure, just from a color perspective and life and
Skip
vibrancy.
Marrakesh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go anywhere else.
Okay.
Maybe do a day or two in Marrakesh, Essaouira, Fez, Tangier. Do just Marrakesh is they don't like photos,
Oh.
and it's all about tourist traps. It's
Oh.
a very difficult place to be. People will call out camera, camera. People will fight you. It's just like, but all of Morocco is very beautiful. Marrakesh is just a very difficult place, especially if you want to take photos.
Oh wow, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah, I
um,
wish I would have found that out, but everything I came across I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. We got there and we're like, fuck this place.
that's so funny. So I've got like a photo bucket list. Obviously, like I want to shoot Paris, Greece. There's like a million places that I want to go and take pictures. Do you have a photo bucket list? And if so, what's like some things that you have on it?
The photo bucket list. Wow. Um, I want to shoot bigger Hollywood sets. That's on my photo bucket list, and I'm working on that right now. I'd love to put out a BTS book of like really beautiful set work because the light's there with like some actors and things of that nature. Um, Photo bucket list. I would love to do some more work in Africa. I haven't traveled like that through Africa, so getting there and photographing, possibly living for a few months to document would be really cool. And man, photo bucket list. I don't know, that's hard to say because like to me, life is so I just love having my camera on me, so when something interesting presents itself, I'm there for it.
Hmm.
I don't really have a bunch of images in my head that I can like pre-conceptualize and be like, oh, one day this is gonna happen. It's more about just staying ready and being glad that I'm exactly where I was when it happened.
That's really interesting, and I'm thinking back now to the camera as like an anchor sort of thing because like my main camera is a EOS R with the 28 to 70 f2. The lens is it's magic, and it's also fucking 91 pounds. It's super
Yeah.
impractical, and I
Mhm.
also have a Hasselblad.
So you use that for professional work as well?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
like your dual.
that's my
Okay.
professional work, and I shoot a lot of medium format on Hasselblad 500 cm, but I haven't taken the Hasselblad out in a while, and I think my dream camera was probably something like a Q2. Its form and function, and you know, it does have a high enough megapixel where like a cropping situation could make it a commercially viable option. But I go through these phases of gear acquisition and gear shedding, and it becomes like this mental game that I'm playing with myself. Like, well, if I only have the Leica M6, I can do XYZ. And oh, if I only got the Hasselblad, I could do XYZ. And I focus a lot less on what work do I want to create. Well, I
Mhm.
used to. I think I've gotten to the point now where I'm very conscious of where I want to go with my journey and what I want to be doing 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And it has very little to do with what camera's in my bag. Although, you know, Leica goals, obviously. um, from a career perspective, and you know, you mentioned doing set photography and working backstage behind the scenes with movies. Do you have a dream project in your mind? Do you have something that you like would love you know, to be afforded the opportunity to make from whether it's working? I mean, I would imagine you've already checked a magically huge bucket list item of being a like ambassador. That's like the pantheon of ambassadorship, in my opinion.
It's all downhill from here. So,
Well, I sure hope not.
where am I gonna go from here?
Well, you can only
Game
go up.
over.
It's only up from here.
Well, some Somebody's gonna have to top Leica soon. So,
That's so funny. But yeah, do you have like
um,
a dream project, something that like it's just like a partnership, a brand, a portrait a subject, something that you are like,
well, I would love to. What I'm trying to do right now is get on the set of Dune 2.
oh,
That's like that's a dream right now. I wish I could have gotten on the set of Dune 1, but it never occurred to me that that was something I was interested in doing. So I'm kind of getting the wheels in motion for Dune 2, if not Dune 2, Dune 3.
nice.
That would be a dream project. I am a true born and bred New Yorker, so I don't have a driver's license. I have a motorcycle license, but not my driver's license. And pre-pandemic, just before the lockdown, I was riding across Route 66 and photographing America. I would love to continue doing that. Um, but I need to get my license. So that's a
Yeah.
dream project where I can just keep documenting this country and focusing on the fact that I feel like a New Yorker, not an American.
It's
And
it's funny you mention that. So when I lost my job last year, I got a very, very generous severance package, and I basically packed my car and I drove across the country for 6,600 miles, about 30 days, took thousands of photographs, and that's kind of when I figured out like what I wanted to spend my time doing with the rest of my life. It was the greatest trip of my life. I hope to be able to replicate it again. It was a life-changing experience. It was an eye-opening experience. It's like
Mhm.
highly recommend. Um,
We can only dream to have those type of experiences.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
taking swallowing a shit sandwich and then like making something great out of it. So it was like a really good
Yeah.
life lesson.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned. I didn't realize you had a motorcycle license, but your motorcycle work I think was with Harley Davidson that you recently worked on.
Yeah, Harley Davidson. It was Jason Momoa's shoot. So he directed that
Okay.
and he shot that. So he had all his sponsors there. So it was Guinness, Harley Davidson, Leica, Light Scene, and Red cameras.
Yeah, that the images that you posted to your Instagram and maybe I might have caught a YouTube video on it or not, were incredible.
Thank you.
That is a lot of like fast paced action kind of gnarly
Yeah,
work.
no joke.
How do you like gear up and prepare for like, those are obviously digitally shot, but like those are fast paced, rapidly moving decisions. Like talk me through like what that process was like in making those images.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that as a photographer, everything that you do up into the jobs is all practice, right? You're all it's just it's work for you to get ready to be able to be in those moments,
Hmm.
right? Like I can't fumble my camera once I get to the
The
actual game,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like you just practice all year so that when this happens, you know what to do. So the reality is that like, I was ready and the principles that I practice with my street photography, I use those same principles everywhere that I go. So no matter what it is that I shoot, my background is street photography. So if you're hiring me, it's because this is what you want, right? You want
Mm.
this street vibe. So I approach that the same way that I approach street photography, except I get to get a little bit closer to my subjects, and they're all kind of like busy doing their thing. And I would just, so some of those photographs look like editorial,
Yeah.
some of them look like street photos. So this is a merging of the two things that I've trained myself, right? Being on sets with Norman Jean Roy and Zenith and Paul Gilmore have trained me to do that editorial look where there's all those portraits of the bikers and it all looks like Ralph Lauren stuff, and then all the action stuff looks like street photography. So I just made sure I had professional cameras to do that with, which I use my SL2 for. And then I use the Q2 because those type of things, it's like you can use manual focus on that, but the M is a different experience for me. That's my street photography camera. Motorcycles moving that fast, I needed something just a little bit faster.
Yeah. Just a little bit
So
with like just a hint of autofocus.
yeah, yeah, and I'm pretty honest about all that stuff. Is that like, as a photographer, you don't. I'm not someone that plans out everything that's going to happen, but I everything that I've learned is what prepares me for these moments, right?
Hmm.
Because I know what's going to happen when something is underexposed or overexposed, or okay, I have to shoot this at an incredibly low shutter speed. How do I get one that's like completely in focus, even though there's no light? No, you know what I mean? It's completely dark in here. So I'll use tricks that I've taught myself, like okay, if I have to shoot at a 30th of a second, I'm going to shoot in ultra high burst mode because I know one of those photos is going to be razor sharp. It's tricks like that, right? So you're always practicing. That's why you should be pushing yourself, pushing your cameras, putting yourself in all these crazy situations so that when the opportunity comes, you're ready.
Hmm. Dude, I love that. You strike me as an individual who's incredibly comfortable and confident in their skill set. And I don't know if that's a factual statement or if that's just me projecting, who I see online to like, your beautiful work, etc. Do you struggle with confidence issues at all? Like, I kid often that the first 5 minutes of any photo shoot, any set, anything I'm doing, I'm like tremendously nervous until I fire the shutter for the first one. But
Yeah.
like, do you ever encounter those kind of feelings?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, every situation that I walk into, hopefully it's brand new. Hopefully I'm not just doing the same things over and over again because then you're not really growing. So with that newness, some fear definitely comes in whether or not you're good enough or these photos going to be great. But then the creative side of you starts to take over and all that knowledge comes to the forefront and you understand what needs to be done to create a good image. Um, I'm confident in my ability. If you put me in a situation, I know that I can handle it because I lean back on all the knowledge that I've gathered throughout the years. And sometimes it takes reminding yourself of what you've done to build the confidence to approach something new.
Hmm.
And sometimes I have to psych myself up for sure. But um, in that process of psyching myself up, I usually come to the conclusion that I know that I'm the right person for this job.
Hmm. That's good. That's confidence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I struggle that with for just briefly 5 minutes, either prior to or during the process of pulling my camera out of my bag, and it doesn't matter whether it's like for a model that I've shot with 100 times or whether it's going out in the street for the thousandth time. It's just very funny. I think they're the imposter syndrome that I deal with is more focused on or comes from a place of like, who am I to think that I could be doing this? And that's just like
Yeah.
something that you've got to untrick your brain to think that way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel that way more when I'm working with models. I've realized that throughout the years, I'm not a fan of shooting models because for me, I'm not somebody that, I'm not like a happy-go-lucky photographer. I'm not like trying to be like, hey, smile or do this or do that. You know what I mean? And like, I'm more looking for something, and shooting models makes me nervous because if what I'm looking for isn't there, then I know we're not going to get there because I'm
Hmm.
just looking for someone that's fascinating. And that's part of the more interesting thing with shooting models is subject selection. So as I'm walking around outside, I'll see someone completely normal and they don't have to be a model, but something is fascinating about them and that's something I want to photograph. So I'm not necessarily looking for somebody that's pretty. I'm looking for somebody that's interesting,
Yeah.
and then I'll want to take their portrait.
Hmm.
But if I'm just dealing with a standard model, well, that can make me nervous because I just don't, I don't care to model the model,
Yeah. No, I
so to
hear that.
speak.
I think some of my favorite model shots are typically throughout the course of the shoot. It's like those alter in between moments.
Candid,
Yeah,
kinda.
right. The
Yeah,
candid stuff. This
yeah.
not the planned. It's the 30 seconds where they're going for the other look that makes the
Hmm.
best picture. Um,
Absolutely.
when you're in the streets, do you see like whether you have a camera in your hand or not? Does life appear to you in a frame?
Does life appear to me in a
I'll
frame?
give you an example.
Um,
When I'm out in the street and I see people, and I think this is because I've just really just dove so hardly into street photography, I see people, places, and things through like frame lines, like through the lens of my
mm,
camera. And I'm just
mm.
wondering if I'm a weirdo or if that's like a common thing.
No, that's great. That sounds fascinating. That sounds like something I should be thinking about. I should be putting up those kind of imaginary frame lines on the scene. And I don't do that. I kind of, again, like the way I approach things is so subject first
Hmm.
that I will try to steal the moments before asking for a photo. And I've given myself permission to do that just from reading and doing research, like not Ralph Gibson, sorry, Bruce Davidson's Subway book, where a lot of those portraits in there are so strong. And he talks about approaching people and asking for portraits in that book. And I don't care. I don't care about this bruising the scene stuff. I can't be bothered with that shit. I'm here to create my images,
Hmm.
not be told how I should be creating images. So I approach people, I talk to them. I don't care about bruising the scene. It's more about that person. And one of the things that he says when he approached people was like, how do I get you back into that place that you were before I approached you? And he'll talk to them and say, what were you thinking about? Where were you kind of were zoning out a little bit? What was on your mind? And he's like, if you wouldn't mind getting back to that place, I'm just going to step out and just kind of let you get back to what you're doing. But I just wanted to ask you if it was okay that I photographed you, you
Wow.
know?
That's super
So
interesting.
yeah, I'm so interested in the people. And uh, that's what I see when I walk out. I just hone in on a person, and it's like everything around them doesn't even matter anymore.
Hmm. I like that. That's pretty interesting.
Mhm.
What are you most proud of about your career to date?
Honestly, shooting for a company as prestigious as Leica. I just got back from Germany, and we had a huge tour. It was the Leica Hall of Fame. We're in Wetzlar, and they showed us everything. They put us up at a hotel. They put me up in a hotel, Leica the Lights Hotel, which is
Yeah, on the
in
same property.
in it's just it's on the same property, and my window was like right at the corner overlooking Leica's the manufacturing and the museums, and it was such a surreal moment, and to go through the history of that company, and I just felt such an immense amount of pride to be shooting with this brand, around those people, meeting the VPs, and they all knew my work. It was a incredible moment.
That's
It was
fucking
definitely a
awesome.
high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Do you have
yeah,
like
it
a
was nice.
do you have like a biggest regret? Like, do you look at anything work related, photo related? And I'm not talking about like
Yeah,
gear
actually.
stuff, but like, yeah.
Yeah, no, gear's a regret. I think my biggest regret is not being like business minded.
Hmm.
I think I regret I think I regret whoring myself out for a brand before the brand was interested in me. And I think that is also, we are all casualties of social media and wanting brand recognition, that I sat here and sold, who knows, countless Fuji cameras for a company for free.
Yeah.
Like that's definitely my biggest regret. I should have focused on the photography more so than a brand. But you live and you learn. Don't. You're, as a photographer, focus on your work, not the brand. You know what I mean? If I just talked about the work spoke for itself. Like, yes, people wanted Fuji cameras, that's a separate conversation. But the fact that I sold something for a brand when they didn't ask me to is definitely a big regret of mine.
I think that's a really, really valuable lesson, for sure. I
For
look at
sure.
it like similarly to obviously I don't have like a beating down my door to sponsor me, nor Fuji or Sony or Canon or anyone, but I look at it like when I want to produce work and I'm really starting to find my niche as being concert photography. I think I've had the ability to shoot some really cool bands, and additionally I've got some really great concerts that I'm shooting coming up that I'm super stoked about. But I think that even when like a band DMs me and asks me to shoot for them, it's like super important for me to be like, listen, I would love to work with you. I would love to capture this moment for you, but like my time is valuable. The post production
Hmm.
work is valuable, and then this is not something that I can just do for free. Like my time is valuable, and you've reached out to me for a reason. And I think if people can start kind of understanding the value in the work that they provide, that it will give them the confidence to be able to ask for what they want.
Hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that's just a standard that we all have to set for ourselves, you know. If you're out here just doing free work, I mean, great, sure, learn, shoot as much stuff as you can for free until you learn. But once you feel like your time is worth something, then you need to make that change and switch over to getting paid for what you're doing.
Yeah, you don't. What's this? You can't buy groceries with Instagram likes. So
Yeah, seriously. And even till this day, you be surprised. I still get people asking me to shoot shit for free, asking me to share. They'll give me exposure.
yeah,
I'm like, it just really blows my mind.
yeah, not so much. Um,
Yeah.
I like to spend the last bit of every episode kind of doing like a little rapid Q&A. Some are super
Mhm.
easy, some are super in depth. Just meant to be like a really quick first thing that comes to your mind kind of thing. What is your
Yep.
favorite book?
The Art of Love by Eric Fromm.
Hmm, I've actually read that. What's your
Hmm.
favorite movie?
My favorite movie would have to be Night of the Demons, 1985.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting choice.
I've watched that movie so many times. It's like
Do you watch a lot of photography documentaries?
I don't. I I look at photography books. I don't watch a lot of photography documentaries. I
Interesting.
should, because everybody's always like, "Have you seen this?" And I'm like, "No." I feel bad.
Yeah, that's funny. What's your favorite food?
Uh, that's a difficult one. It's definitely a toss up between Spanish food and Chinese food.
That's fair. Um,
Shitty New York food, you know?
the greasier, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you believe in an afterlife?
Oh man, I I don't, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, oh, that's fair.
Mm.
Are you happy?
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy.
That's good.
It's hard to keep me down, so.
I mean, that's a great attitude.
Yeah.
I had a rough week, and I think it took almost getting killed to kind of snap me out of that funk. But it's
Interesting.
amazing
Yeah,
what
it'll
a
do that, huh?
it's amazing what a near death experience will do for a person. What's the best piece of advice someone's ever given you?
Actually, the best piece of advice anybody's ever given me was from my mom. She was like, "Don't sacrifice your happiness for someone else's."
Ooh, that's good. What is your best
Very
piece of
simple.
advice for someone who's hearing you on this podcast for the first time?
Best piece of advice. Find your voice. Find your voice. I always find that to be incredibly, even if it upsets people, find your voice because I think it's very easy to want to just be likable or say things that will please people. But when I was 19, I realized that I was just talking and I was just saying things that people wanted to hear. And I got tired of doing that. And I think I turned into the person that I was supposed to be because I wasn't upset or afraid to speak my mind and
Hmm,
upset people.
that's crucial.
Find your voice.
That's great.
Hmm.
I like that. Last question. What's like a recommendation for something that you've consumed lately that you think everyone should check out? Could be a book you've read, movie, TV show, just something that you've
Hmm.
consumed lately that you think everyone should check out.
I'm gonna go with a YouTube channel and say, look up the Dress Up Gang. These guys, there's a video called Cute House from the Dress Up Gang on YouTube that just recently went viral, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It's like 1980s and early 90s family sitcom style of a YouTube channel. They do some sketches, but like they nail it, and it's very, very funny.
Nice. I'll check that out. Jason, dude, I said it before we got on the air. This is a super full circle moment for me in my journey from photography perspective, from like a life perspective, to have you on the podcast today. I'm immensely appreciative of your time today, and you're such a huge inspiration for me, not just creatively, but just you're a good dude with good vibes, and just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
John, thank you. Seriously, this was a pleasure and it's such an honor to be on here, man. This was really fun, and I have no doubt that you're going to take this as far as you'd like to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah. All right, brother.